The moment we stepped into the cabin, I knew something was wrong. My seat, 9A, window, business class, was already taken by a man in a crisp navy suit who looked like he belonged in a courtroom, not a plane. "Kids don't need legroom," he scoffed. "Let the adults sit up here." My mom didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just smiled, reached for her phone, and said, "One call." That's all it took. 7 minutes later, the captain announced an emergency landing. What happened after that changed everything. They told me the flight from LAX to Tokyo would be long, but exciting. That it would be my first time flying in the big seats, the ones with pillows, warm towels, and menus like in restaurants. Grandpa called them thrones, a word I loved. A throne meant I was important, and today, I was. He had given this trip to me and Mom as a gift for my 9th birthday. A girls-only adventure. The ticket even had my name, Lily Anderson, seat 9A, window. Business class. A dream. But dreams don't usually start with someone else sitting in your throne. He was already there when we boarded. A tall man in a navy suit, legs sprawled, tapping through emails on his phone like the seat had been his all along. Mom checked the seat number again. 9A. She paused, offered her calmest smile, and gently said, "Excuse me, sir. I believe this is my daughter's seat." The man barely looked up. "You sure?" he said without emotion, fingers still scrolling. When Mom nodded, he chuckled, an ugly, dismissive sound, and finally met her gaze. "Well, even if it is, it's a waste," he muttered. "No offense, but letting a kid sit up here? Seriously?" He glanced at me, then back at Mom. "You do realize this is business class, right?" My cheeks burned. I looked down at my shoes, pretending I didn't hear. Mom's hand gently touched my shoulder, steadying me. "We paid full price. It was a gift from her grandfather." He raised a brow. "Then he should have gifted you better sense." That's when I felt it. The ripple. Heads turning, passengers nearby catching on. Some frowned, others avoided looking at us altogether. No one spoke. Mom inhaled slowly, but her voice remained calm. "Sir, please move. My daughter deserves the seat she was assigned." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Deserve?" he repeated, like it was a dirty word. "Look, lady, I've flown this airline for over a decade. I've racked up more miles than you can count. Your daughter won't appreciate this seat. She'll kick the tray table, spill juice, annoy people with cartoons. She can sit in the back with the rest of the kids. Save the throne for those who earn it." Each word chipped away at my confidence. My fingers clutched the strap of my backpack tighter. The dream was cracking, and fast. A flight attendant appeared, blonde hair in a tight bun, smile strained. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Mom said calmly. "This man is occupying my daughter's seat." The attendant glanced at Greg, then at me, then back to Mom. She gave a polite, professional nod. "Let me check the manifest." Moments later, she returned, smiling too much. "I'm terribly sorry. It appears there may have been a duplication error in our system. These things happen from time to time." Greg smirked. "But," the attendant continued, "if you wouldn't mind, ma'am, we'd be happy to relocate you and your daughter to seats further back. I'll make sure it's as comfortable as possible. Extra snacks, window seat." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Are you asking me to move, even though we have the rightful claim to this seat?" The attendant's voice dropped a tone. "We're asking for your cooperation, for the sake of a smooth boarding process." There it was, that invisible pressure, the expectation to be reasonable. Translation: don't cause a scene. Keep quiet. Move along. Greg folded his arms, victorious. "See? Even the staff agrees. Let's not ruin this flight over a technical hiccup." I felt the sting before the tears. The way people looked at us. Pity. Annoyance. Some just went back to their newspapers and podcasts. We were the disruption. We were the noise. I wasn't a girl with a birthday gift anymore. I was a problem. I wanted to vanish. Mom, however, didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she said 5 words that would become the beginning of something much, much bigger. "Let me make one call." Greg rolled his eyes. The attendant looked relieved, probably thinking Mom had decided to call a husband or a travel agent or someone to complain and let it end there. But that wasn't the call she was about to make. She stepped aside, pulling out her phone with surgical precision. Her voice was low but clear, speaking into the receiver with an authority I hadn't heard before. Not like a mom asking for help, but like someone reporting an incident. I heard phrases I didn't understand. Documented verbal discrimination, minor involved, passenger behavior escalating. She gave flight numbers, crew names, times. Her voice stayed calm, clinical, scary almost. And then she ended the call. No yelling, no threats, just a nod. "Thank you," she said softly and hung up. Greg looked over, still smug. "So, your husband gonna fix this for you?" Mom turned back to me, ignoring him. She knelt down, met my eyes, and whispered, "Don't worry, just stay here." I didn't understand what she had done, but I nodded, because something had shifted. I could feel it. Within minutes, the flight attendants began moving with nervous energy. Whispers, walkie-talkies crackling. A message came from the cockpit. "We apologize for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. Please remain seated as we finalize our flight manifest." Mom said nothing. Greg looked less confident now. He unfolded and refolded his newspaper, checked his phone, crossed and uncrossed his legs. I could almost see him calculating, and for the first time he seemed uncertain. 7 minutes later, the plane took off, and that was when everything changed. The engines roared, pressing us back into our seats as the plane surged upward into the sky. I didn't say a word. I was too busy holding my breath, gripping the armrests like they were the only things keeping me from falling apart. Mom sat beside me, calm as ever. Not a single flicker of emotion betrayed her face. From the corner of my eye, I watched her check her phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode. She looked like a surgeon preparing for the first incision. Steady, precise, terrifying. Greg, meanwhile, was back to pretending he owned the cabin. His jacket was folded neatly over his lap, and he'd returned to scrolling through something on his tablet, headphones in, as if none of the past 15 minutes had happened. But I had seen it. The tension in the air, the way the flight attendant's jaw clenched as she walked past us. The 2 quiet glances exchanged between her and the purser near the galley. The sudden pause when Greg's name showed up on a printed passenger manifest. Things were shifting. I could feel it in the cabin's silence. 7 minutes. That's how long it took. 7 minutes after takeoff, the captain's voice crackled through the overhead speaker. Calm, professional, but something in his tone made the whole cabin freeze. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've encountered an unexpected issue, and in accordance with federal protocol, we will be diverting our flight. Our new destination is Denver International Airport, where we will be making an emergency landing. We appreciate your cooperation." Emergency landing. A ripple of confusion spread down the aisle. A woman gasped behind us. Someone up front asked, "Is it the engine?" A man a few rows away started hitting the call button over and over again. But Mom, she just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. Greg tore his headphones off. "What the hell?" he blurted, looking around. "Did someone say emergency?" The flight attendants moved quickly. Calmer now, but in that calm before the storm kind of way. The blonde one from earlier walked past with her lips pressed in a line, holding a folder tighter than necessary. She didn't make eye contact with Greg. That, more than anything, made him nervous. He looked at Mom, narrowed his eyes. "Did you do something?" Mom turned to him with the faintest smile. "Me? I just made one call?" Greg's face twisted. "This is ridiculous. If you're trying to intimidate people with whatever connections you think you have, let me warn you." Mom interrupted, her voice velvet smooth. "Connections? No. Protocols? Yes. Greg blinked. What does that even mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small leather portfolio, and opened it. Just enough for me to see a card with a gold seal and bold official letters. She didn't show it to Greg, didn't wave it around. She just let it sit there, visible only for a second, before slipping it back in. I didn't understand all of it, but I caught a few words. Federal Human Rights Liaison. Greg didn't see the card, but he saw her eyes, and something in them finally made him stop talking. It took another 20 minutes for us to descend into Denver airspace. Outside the window, the city lights sparkled like shattered stars. But inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with questions. Nobody knew what was happening, but everyone felt it had something to do with us. I kept my head down, pretending to nap, but my mind was a storm. I replayed the scene over and over, Greg's voice, the sting of his words, the burn of injustice. The way Mom didn't shout or threaten, just acted. She didn't need an army. She was one. When we landed, there was no applause, no jokes, just a strained silence as the plane taxied to a remote corner of the tarmac. We weren't parked at a terminal. We were far from the gates, alone. The seatbelt sign dinged. The overhead bin stayed shut. The captain's voice came back. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Ground security will be boarding shortly. We ask for your patience. Greg shifted uncomfortably. He looked out the window. Why aren't we at a gate? He asked, no one in particular. Then louder. Excuse me? Why is no one explaining anything? No answer. Then the door opened. Two uniformed security officers stepped inside, followed by a man in a dark gray suit with a clipboard. He looked serious, controlled. Behind him, a woman in a navy blazer with a badge around her neck scanned the cabin, then nodded. The suited man stepped forward, his voice loud enough for the entire business class cabin to hear. Passengers Lily Anderson, Emily Anderson, and Greg Warren, please gather your belongings and come with us. My heart stopped. Everyone turned to look. Greg's mouth fell open. What? Why? What the hell is this? The officer behind the man didn't flinch. Sir, you need to come with us, now. I stood up shakily, grabbing my backpack. Mom rose beside me, still as calm as ever. Greg hesitated, then stumbled up, almost knocking over his bag. Is someone going to explain what's going on? He demanded. The man in the suit looked him dead in the eye. All questions will be answered in the proper setting. The aisle parted for us as we walked. Eyes watched us like we were ghosts. Some with curiosity, some with fear. No one spoke. As we stepped off the plane and into the waiting vehicle, Greg turned to Mom one last time. This is a mistake, he said, almost pleading. Mom didn't look at him. It's just protocol, she said softly, and then the door shut. We were driven across the tarmac in a black van with tinted windows. No words were spoken inside, just the hum of the engine, the occasional crackle of a radio, and the weight of what none of us understood, or in Mom's case, wouldn't say out loud. I sat between her and the wall, fingers clutching my backpack straps like they might anchor me to something real. Greg sat opposite, legs jittering, eyes darting between Mom and the officers like he was trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing pieces. This is insane, he muttered, voice just loud enough to hear. I've done nothing wrong. I didn't touch anyone, didn't raise my voice. This is a mix-up. Nobody responded. The van pulled up to an unmarked building. No logos, no windows, just a concrete box attached to the side of the airport. The kind of place that made you feel like the rules outside didn't apply here. The sliding doors opened, and a man in another suit stepped forward. This way, please. Greg hesitated. Where are we? What is this? The officer beside him didn't answer, just motioned forward. We walked through a hallway with no posters, no airline advertisements, no welcome signs. Just gray walls and silence. They led us into a conference room. Long glass table, chairs on one side. On the other, more suits. A woman with steel gray hair. A man with a tablet in front of him. Another flipping through a file marked with red tape. None of them looked like airline staff. We were motioned to sit. Greg refused. "I'm not sitting anywhere until someone tells me what the hell is going on." The woman with the gray hair looked up at him like she was inspecting a coffee stain. "Mr. Warren, you are currently listed on an incident manifest involving a potential violation of international human rights protocol aboard a commercial aircraft. You will be given the opportunity to respond. But first, we require silence." Greg opened his mouth, then shut it. Human rights? I didn't fully understand what that meant in this moment, but I saw it land like a punch to Greg's stomach. His skin paled. Mom finally spoke. "My daughter and I will cooperate fully." The woman nodded. "We know." They brought us water, crackers. Someone handed me a coloring book, which felt so wildly out of place that I just stared at it. I didn't want to color. I wanted to know what was happening. One of the men addressed Mom directly. "Ms. Anderson, your report triggered automatic escalation due to your clearance level. Before we proceed, please confirm your current title." Mom's voice was steady. "Senior Liaison Officer, Federal Human Rights Commission, ID 273B. Greg sat down, hard. His eyes flicked toward her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not just as a mom or a passenger, but as something else entirely. A force, an official, someone who didn't just file complaints, someone who changed laws. "No," he whispered. "You're bluffing." But no one laughed. The man with the tablet continued. "Mr. Warren, your behavior has been flagged in 3 prior incidents reported by airline staff. 2 involving discriminatory comments toward passengers of color. 1 involving aggressive remarks to a flight attendant under the age of 21. All previously de-escalated due to insufficient evidence. This time, with a federal-level witness present, the case is now under formal review." Greg's face flushed crimson. "That's ridiculous. Those were misunderstandings. No one ever told me." "That's not true," the gray-haired woman cut in. "You were warned. Twice. We have acknowledgement signatures on file." Greg looked like he might be sick. This is because of that kid's seat?" He pointed at me like I was a stain, like I wasn't a person. Mom's hand closed over mine. "No," she said softly. "This is because of your pattern." Twist 3 landed right there. Greg thought he was being punished for a one-time offense, a seat, a child, a moment of arrogance. But this wasn't about one incident. It was about everyone that had come before. And I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the start. I wanted to feel victorious, to see him squirm and know he was finally being held accountable. But instead, I felt small. Like the room was too big and the ceiling too low and the air too heavy. I didn't want to be here. I wanted my pillow and my stuffed dog and a regular seat on a regular plane where I didn't have to fight for the space I was promised. Greg sat with his head in his hands now. Not yelling, not arguing, just deflating. And I wondered, when someone like him falls, do they even understand why? Or do they just think the world turned against them? The woman stood. "We'll be moving you to a separate interview room," she said to Greg. "Your legal team will be contacted shortly." He didn't move. "Now, Mr. Warren." He stood, finally, but not like a man walking out, like a balloon losing air. Defeated, confused. Mom didn't look at him as he left. I did. And I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Once he was gone, the room changed. The agents softened. The tension dropped by a few degrees. They asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. Someone brought me juice. Another gave Mom a folder full of papers she began reading immediately. I leaned against her shoulder, whispering, "Why didn't you tell him who you were earlier?" She stroked my hair gently. "Because the ones who deserve to know will always find out, and the ones who assume they're untouchable need to fall by surprise." I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. We waited in silence after Greg was led away. The thick door clicked behind him with the kind of finality that made my stomach sink. The air in the room felt colder without him, but also heavier, as if the absence of shouting only made space for something deeper. Consequence. A few minutes passed before another team entered. This time, they weren't dressed in security uniforms or airport staff attire. These people wore dark suits, name badges with gold trim, and eyes that had seen 1,000 incidents like ours. One woman had a headset tucked beneath her sleek ponytail, and the man beside her carried a sleek black briefcase that looked more like a courtroom accessory than something for air travel. They didn't sit. Instead, the woman stepped forward. "Mrs. Anderson, thank you for your swift coordination. I'm Agent Monroe. This is Agent Keaton. We're from the International Commission for Passenger Rights and Civil Liberties. Your call triggered a Level 3 response." Mom gave a short nod. I suspected as much. Agent Monroe turned to me with a brief, practiced smile. "And this must be Lily." I nodded slowly. I didn't know how to smile back. These people didn't speak like teachers or neighbors. They spoke like they were here for something bigger. And I was suddenly very small. "We've compiled preliminary data from the flight," Agent Keaton said, placing a tablet on the table. "Would you both be willing to review video documentation related to the incident?" Mom looked at me. I nodded again. The screen came to life. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Grainy footage from the cabin security camera. There I was, standing awkwardly near my seat. Mom speaking calmly to Greg. His smug expression. The dismissive wave. His exact words, captioned beneath. "Kids don't need legroom. Let the adults sit here." I winced watching it, even though I'd just lived it hours ago. It hurt more seeing it from the outside, like proof that I really wasn't just imagining the coldness. Then came the twist. Agent Keaton tapped the screen, and a second video began playing. A different flight, a different day, but the same Greg. He was in business class again, standing over a black woman and her teenage son. His words, this time more direct, more cruel. "You people always push your way in, don't you?" Gasps echoed from another part of the room. I realized we weren't alone anymore. Several analysts had gathered near the side wall, quietly watching. I turned to Mom. Her jaw was tight. She'd seen this before. She wasn't surprised. The footage continued. Another video, another plane. Greg confronting a male flight attendant. This time, his tone was different. Condescending, lewd. The younger man looked uncomfortable but kept smiling, nodding, retreating. "He's been doing this for years," Agent Monroe said flatly. "But no case ever escalated beyond an internal note or verbal warning," Agent Keaton added. "We requested files from 3 airlines in the past 4 hours. We now have a total of 5 flagged incidents, all with similar patterns. Minorities, young staff, women, children." I shivered. "Why hasn't anything been done?" I whispered before I realized I was speaking. Agent Monroe didn't hesitate. "Because until today, no incident involved a federal-level witness." That's when they played the last clip. It wasn't from a security cam. It was a phone recording, shaky, taken from behind a row of seats. Greg was standing again, this time yelling at someone not on camera. His voice was cruel, mocking. The camera panned slightly, and the person filming caught a glimpse of themselves in the window reflection. A young woman, blonde, nervous, wearing a navy vest with a name tag. The flight attendant from our flight. I sat up straighter. "She recorded this?" I asked. "No," Agent Keaton said. "She sent this, today." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Whistleblower?" Monroe nodded. "Anonymous at first, but when she saw your name on the manifest, she sent the full clip, and then the real twist landed." Agent Keaton tapped a new file. A recorded voice message played over the speakers. "This man, Greg Warren, used to be my supervisor at a logistics company before he moved into aviation. He did this stuff all the time, demeaned people, mocked accents, told me once I'd never get promoted because I was too nice. I never reported him, not really, but today I saw the little girl on my flight, and I saw the same look I used to have. So this is me reporting it now." The voice cracked toward the end. She sounded afraid, but determined. Greg didn't just act like this on planes. This was who he was. And now the system knew. Her statement alone, Agent Monroe said, triggers a reclassification of this case. It's no longer just a passenger dispute. It's now a workplace pattern and a potential civil rights violation with cross-sector implications. I didn't fully get the legal terms, but I understood the shift. This wasn't just about my seat. It wasn't even about Greg's behavior on the plane. This was about a man who'd been hurting people for years because no one stopped him. Until now. Mom reached into her bag and pulled out the folder they'd given her earlier. I'd like to submit a formal co-signed statement, she said, on behalf of myself and my daughter. Full cooperation, full transparency. Monroe nodded. It will be taken seriously. I looked around the room again. No lawyers, no Greg. Just professionals. Suits. Silence. And my mom. Not just my mom, but someone who clearly knew how to wield power without raising her voice. That room didn't feel scary anymore. It felt like the place where justice begins. The room was colder now, not physically, just emotionally, like the air between me and Mom had been replaced with something heavy and sharp. I sat in the hotel suite's oversized armchair, legs tucked beneath me, face pressed into my knees. I didn't want the crackers. I didn't want the juice. I didn't want to talk to anyone, especially her. Mom stood by the window, her back to me, still holding the briefing folder from earlier. She hadn't sat down since we returned from that gray building. She hadn't asked how I was doing. She hadn't touched me or even made eye contact, because maybe she didn't want to see what I'd become. I'd been strong on the plane. Brave, even, but now I felt broken. You didn't have to do that, I finally whispered, my voice thick with tears. She turned slowly, brows slightly furrowed. Do what, Lily? I lifted my head, eyes red, nose stuffy. Make it a big deal. Bring in the government. Talk to people in suits. Make the plane land early. Make everyone look at me like I was some problem. Mom didn't flinch. You weren't the problem. He was. But you made it worse. It came out louder than I meant. It echoed in the room, hitting the glass and bouncing back at me. Mom's expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders slumped. I didn't ask for any of this, I continued, tears streaming down my face. I just wanted to sit in my seat and watch a movie and eat snacks like a normal kid. You turned it into a mission. She walked toward me slowly and knelt down, her voice calm but laced with something heavy. I know this is overwhelming. I pulled away. You didn't ask me. You just did it, like I was part of some plan. Her eyes closed for a second, then opened again, full of something I didn't recognize. Not frustration, not guilt, something deeper. I didn't do this just for you, Lily. I looked at her, hurt blooming in my chest. What does that even mean? She exhaled, then whispered, It's not just for you. It's for every girl who couldn't speak. The words landed with the gentleness of a feather and the weight of a mountain. I wanted to understand them, but I didn't want them now. I turned my face away and muttered, I wish you hadn't. Silence, the kind that stretches into places it doesn't belong. That night I didn't eat dinner. I didn't brush my teeth. I crawled into the hotel bed, pulled the sheets over my head, and wished I could go back to this morning, before the seat, before the flight, before any of it. I heard Mom on the phone in the other room, talking softly, probably to someone important, probably about me. I hated that. At some point, I drifted into a restless sleep full of voices I didn't recognize, men in suits, women reading statements, flashes of Greg's face twisted with anger, of people clapping, cameras flashing, and me, standing on a stage I never asked to be on. I woke up just before sunrise. The light crept through the curtains like it was afraid to disturb us. I sat up slowly, rubbed my swollen eyes, and tiptoed to the door of the living area. Mom was on the couch, still dressed in yesterday's clothes, staring at the wall like she'd been sitting there all night. The empty coffee cup on the table said she hadn't slept. I opened the door a little more, the soft creak making her turn. couldn't sleep either?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She patted the couch beside her. I didn't move. "I know you're upset," she said gently. "And I know you probably hate me a little right now." I didn't answer. She ran a hand through her messy hair. "I've spent my entire adult life teaching others to stand up for themselves. And today, when it was about you, I didn't ask how you felt. I just assumed you'd want what I want." I looked up. Tears sat on the edge of her lashes. "I'm sorry, Lily," she whispered, "for pushing you into a storm you didn't choose." I swallowed hard. "Why did you do it?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "When I was your age, I was told to smile and stay quiet, even when things were unfair, especially then. I grew up thinking that if I caused too much noise, I wouldn't be taken seriously. That if I fought back, I'd be the bad guy. So I stayed silent for a long time. Too long." She took a shaky breath. "But when I saw that man steal your seat and speak to you like you were less than human, I saw myself, the younger me, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Something cracked inside me. I sat down beside her, not close, just enough. "I'm not brave like you," I whispered. She shook her head. "You're braver, because you still showed up, even when it scared you. I only learned how to do that much later." I wanted to believe her, but I also wanted to disappear. "I don't want to talk to more people," I said softly. "I don't want to be in the news or go to court or have strangers know my name." She nodded. "Then we won't." "You promise?" "I promise." She didn't say it with a smile. She said it like it hurt to mean it. That morning, we didn't do interviews. We didn't meet with agents. We just sat in silence, watching the sky lighten through the windows of the hotel suite. And, for the first time since this all began, I wished the world would just forget my name. The hotel room was still dim when the call came. I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in the oversized white blanket that smelled like fabric softener and unfamiliarity. Mom had gone to take a shower. Her clothes from yesterday were folded neatly on the chair, and her phone buzzed softly against the wooden table. It was Grandpa. His name lit up the screen like a lighthouse. Joseph Anderson. I stared at it for a few seconds, not sure if I wanted to answer. My heart beat faster. I was still angry, still confused. But also, I needed to hear his voice. I slid my finger across the screen. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then the warmest sound in the world came through the speaker. "Lily," Grandpa said. "You sound tired." "Sweetheart." "I am," I whispered. "I've been watching the news," he said gently. "They're talking about you, about the flight, about what your mother did." I clenched my jaw. She didn't ask me first. "I know," he said. "And I think she knows that too." I stayed quiet. He continued, voice calm like always. "You want to know why I gave you that ticket, don't you?" I hesitated. "Because you wanted me to have fun?" There was a soft chuckle on the other end. "Partly. I did want you to enjoy the flight. I wanted you to feel special, to be pampered, to know what first-class care feels like." Another pause. "But more than that, I wanted you to see the world, not just from 30,000 feet, but as it really is." I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" "That seat was the world's smallest classroom," he said softly. "For you to learn, never give your dignity away." His words echoed. I sat up a little straighter. "I don't understand," I admitted. "You will," he said. "That man took your seat. But more than that, he tried to take your right to be there, your space, your voice. And the people around him, they let him, because it was easier to stay quiet." The lump in my throat returned. "I didn't want to fight," I whispered. "I just wanted it to stop." "I know," Grandpa said. "And wanting peace doesn't make you weak, but being afraid to stand up, that's what they count on." He paused, letting that sink in. "There's a rule I learned a long time ago," he continued. "The world won't always hand you fairness. Sometimes you have to demand it. Not with fists or shouting, but with the truth. And sometimes, telling the truth is the bravest thing you can do. I thought of Mom. The way she stood so calmly in front of all those people. The way she didn't yell, didn't beg, just made a call. What if people hate me for it? I asked quietly. They might, he said. People don't like being reminded they're wrong. But for every person who turns their back, there are 10 more who'll whisper, "Thank you," because they couldn't say it themselves. My eyes burned again. Did that ever happen to you? I asked. He sighed. More than once. In the army, in the courthouse, even in the grocery store. I've been looked down on, ignored, told to stay in my place. But I remembered what my mother told me. You don't need a title to deserve respect. You just need a spine. That made me smile, even through the tears. I don't feel very brave, I admitted. He chuckled. That's how you know you are. The brave ones never do. They just act anyway. I sniffled, wiping my nose on the sleeve of my sweatshirt. So what should I do now? There was a long pause. Then his voice dropped to a soft whisper. You decide. You don't owe anyone your voice, Lily, not even me. But if you want to speak, if you feel like something inside you won't let it rest, then maybe that's your answer. My heart beat a little louder. I think I'm scared. You should be, he said. That means it matters. After we hung up, I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, feeling the weight of his words settle into my chest like puzzle pieces that had finally clicked. That seat hadn't been just a birthday gift. It had been a lesson. Not about comfort or luxury, but about presence. About the right to exist in a space without apology. About dignity. I stood up, pulled the curtain aside, and looked out at the sky. It was soft pink now, the sun just peeking over the edge of the city. Planes were taking off in the distance, climbing into the air like arrows released into the future. One of them could have been ours. One of them still could be. Mom came out of the bathroom, drying her hair with a towel. She saw me by the window and paused. Grandpa called, I said. Her face softened. How is he? Wise, I replied. She smiled, stepping closer. Always has been. I looked up at her, searching her eyes for the same steadiness I'd seen during the flight. It was still there, but now I saw something else too. Worry, regret, love. I don't know if I'm ready to talk to anyone, I said honestly. Mom nodded. That's okay. But, I hesitated, then said, I don't want to hide anymore either. Her smile returned, brighter now. That's more than enough, she said. For today. And it was. The morning light danced across the hotel suite, but the air inside was heavy with anticipation. Mom sat at the small dining table, an unopened envelope and a thick teal folder in front of her. I sat on the bed, my legs curled under me, listening to my own heartbeat. Every breath felt slow, sticky. A knock sounded at the door. Mom paused, glanced at me. It's them, she whispered. I held my breath as Mom got up and walked to the door. I watched her put on her composure like armor before she opened it. Two men stepped in. One carried a black briefcase. The other had a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. They introduced themselves as representatives from Greg's company. On behalf of the board and our legal counsel, please allow me, the man in the suit began. Before he could finish, Mom closed the door and motioned for them to sit. He cleared his throat. We deeply regret the inconvenience and distress you and your daughter have experienced. Mr. Warren's behavior does not reflect the values we aim to uphold. To demonstrate our sincerity, we would like to offer compensation, an immediate payment of $2 million. No litigation, no media exposure, just a clean resolution. The briefcase clicked open, revealing a check inside. A crisp, official check with the company's name printed in bold at the top. $2 million. I stared, mouth dry. $2 million. Enough to buy dozens of houses, to wipe away every bad moment on that plane. But before I could breathe, Mom said, "We do not accept hush money." The men exchanged uneasy glances. The man cleared his throat again. "We understand, but you must consider this carefully. For the sake of your daughter's future, no parent wants their child's name scrubbed across news headlines, exposed to interviews, unwanted cameras. We guarantee absolute confidentiality. You take the money, your daughter goes home, the story ends quietly." I sat up, leaning forward. Every instinct screamed something was wrong. Mom stood, eyes steady. "This isn't about money. This is about dignity, justice, and ensuring no one else has to endure what my daughter did." The suit man frowned. The other one exhaled, visibly annoyed. They shifted into a new tone. Then came the twist. He said quietly, with chilling calm, "Do you know how fast a child's life has changed these days? A divided childhood, social media, opinions, even secondary school science fairs. They'll point and whisper. There will be blogs, there will be rumors. We're offering safety and solitude. But if you decline, publicly, legally challenging a company of this scope has consequences. For you and for Lily. A childhood that could have been quiet and ordinary might not ever feel that way again." He let it hang. I stared at him, choked back a scream. Mom's jaw clenched, but she didn't step back. She didn't look away. Her voice was steady, but cold. "Are you threatening a child?" The man smiled again, polite, professional. "I'm advising, protecting. If you reject it, when this becomes public, there's no going back. Your daughter will always be seen as the little girl who sued. She might lose scholarships. Parents look at that differently. Teachers too. Imagine a lifelong label over her head." My fingers tingled. Heat ran up my spine. I swallowed hard. Twist landed. Not only were they trying to buy us off, but they were threatening to steal my childhood if I didn't comply. I looked at Mom, expecting her to stop them, but she stayed calm. She folded her hands in front of her, unwrinkled her skirt, spoke in the same steady tone she'd used on the flight. "We will go public if the documents show evidence of suppressed complaints, and we already know they do. You may wish to intimidate, but true justice isn't bought. It's earned." She paused and continued. "We have statements, whistleblowers, third-party witnesses. Our decision is final." It was final. They left with their briefcase and their polite smiles. The suite felt cold again. I wanted to collapse. I felt small, lost. The fear swelled. I thought of every school bully, every rumor, every moment I had stood quiet. This threat wasn't just words. It was a tidal wave towards my life. Mom looked at me then, finally stepping forward. Her voice broke through the fear like a blade. "Lily," she said softly, placing her hands on my shoulders, "you don't have to continue. You don't have to keep speaking. I never asked you to do this." But I shook my head. Tears threatened to spill. "I can't keep going," I whispered, voice cracking. "I don't want to give up my childhood. I just want to go home." Mom closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, I saw brokenness, but also love. She nodded. "All right," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "We're done. We're leaving this fight, and you're going back to being my Lily, not the girl who made headlines." I exhaled. It felt like stepping off a ledge. She knelt and kissed my forehead. I closed my eyes and let her hold me. I spent the rest of the day packing in silence. Each item I touched felt heavier than it should. The blanket, my pillow, the stuffed dog with its floppy ears. Everything carried the weight of every choice we had made, and every choice we were now undoing. Mom didn't look at the unopened check. I assumed she knew where it remained, sealed in an envelope that would never be opened. That night we had no interviews, no calls. We didn't talk to agents or journalists. We just sat beside each other in the dark, whispering about the flight home, the snacks I wanted, and what I would do first when I saw Grandpa again. And I felt relief, because for once, I didn't feel like a soldier. I felt like a child again. The hotel room was wrapped in silence, broken only by the occasional hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of city life below. I lay in bed, my face turned to the window, watching streetlights blur like ghosts behind the curtains. Mom sat at the small table, her laptop open, fingers hovering above the keyboard but unmoving. Her phone buzzed once, then again, and again. She checked it. Her face changed, first confused, then focused. I turned slightly, curious. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. She glanced at me. "Someone sent me an email." I blinked. "Who?" She didn't answer immediately. She opened the message and read it aloud. "Dear Mrs. Anderson, I was sitting 5 rows behind you on the flight. I didn't say anything. I should have. I saw everything. If your daughter chooses to speak, I'll testify. I saw what he said, what he did. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. I want to help now." The words felt like air returning to the room, like someone had cracked open a window after hours of suffocation. I sat up in bed. "He wants to help?" Mom nodded. "He's not the only one." She opened the next message, then another, and another. Each one came from someone different. A passenger, a flight attendant, a retired pilot. Some messages were short, others pages long. Some apologized. Others offered formal witness statements. But they all had one thing in common. They'd been silent, and now they didn't want to be. One message stood out. It came from a boy. His name was Marcus. He was 11. His email had typos, emojis, and a link to a video. "Who's Marcus?" I asked as Mom opened the video. He appeared on screen, sitting on the edge of a twin bed in a small, dimly lit room. His face was serious, but his voice trembled slightly. "Hi, Lily," he began. "You don't know me, but I saw your story. Something kinda like that happened to me before. This man at a store told me I couldn't try on the nice sneakers because they weren't for kids like me. My mom was so mad, but she didn't say anything. We just left. I felt like I did something wrong." He paused, swallowed. "But then I saw you, on the news. You were brave. You said no. And I thought, maybe I can too." Marcus lifted a drawing, clumsily colored with crayons. It showed a girl with light hair and a crown, standing on an airplane seat. Around her were shadows, tall and dark, but she stood with her fists raised, unafraid. Below it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Your courage gave me courage." I felt something inside me burst. The tears came fast. Not the kind I'd cried when I was scared or angry or exhausted. These were different. They felt real, heavy, cleansing. "He drew that?" I whispered. Mom nodded, her own voice cracking. "He did." The next few hours were a blur of messages, screenshots of strangers around the world holding signs. "We stand with Lily." A grandmother in Canada wrote a letter about her own childhood. A teacher from South Africa said she'd use my story to teach her students about standing up for themselves. There were messages in Spanish, French, Japanese, Arabic. People I had never met, saying my name like it meant something. And then came the hashtag. Stand with Lily. It started small. Twitter, then Instagram, then entire blog posts, then videos. Even a short animation someone had made, turning my story into a cartoon. A little girl facing a giant and refusing to back down. I stared at it all. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It's very real," Mom said, "and growing." I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights. They didn't look as cold anymore. The world didn't seem so big, or maybe I didn't feel so small. That night, as we sat on the couch, someone knocked softly on the door. It was the hotel concierge, holding a package. "This arrived for Miss Anderson," he said. My eyes widened. "For me?" He nodded. hand-delivered by a woman who said she sat near you on the plane. Inside the box was a letter and a sketchbook. The letter read, "I was the one who looked away, the one who stayed silent. I'm sorry. Please use this to draw the world the way it should be." The sketchbook had only one page used. On it, a childlike drawing of a girl holding hands with others of all colors, all sizes, standing in a circle around a single seat. A throne. I turned to Mom, hands trembling. "I want to speak," I said. Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I'm still scared, but I'm also angry. And I think, if I don't say something now, I'll carry it forever." She walked over and pulled me into a tight hug. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "Just honest." That night, I wrote down everything I wanted to say. I didn't know where I'd say it yet, or how, but the words came, fast and messy and loud. I wrote about my seat, about Greg, about how small I felt, about Marcus, about the drawing, the voices, the fear, the fire. When I was done, I looked up. "I'm ready," and this time, I really meant it. The courtroom was massive. Vaulted ceilings, rows of desks, stern faces, all watching me like I was about to take center stage in someone else's story. My mom and I sat at the plaintiff's table, facing a wall of cameras and reporters that seemed to blink as one entity. On the opposite side, Greg's legal team sat behind him, dressed in dark suits, eyes lowered, calculating. I felt small, perched on the wooden chair, but also sharp, strangely steady. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. He introduced the case, Lily Anderson versus Greg Warren et al. He spoke politely, but official. This wasn't just about a plane seat. It was about international discrimination protocol violations. My heart pounded. Greg's lead attorney began. He leaned forward, flipped open a binder thick with documents. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "what we are seeing today is an unfortunate series of coincidences and misunderstandings. A fatherly businessman, upholding his own dignity, confronted with hysteria. The plaintiff is a minor, represented by a lawyer, maternal authority figure. We contend that Lily is not speaking for herself, but acting as a proxy for her mother's agenda." My ears burned. I glanced at Mom. She didn't flinch. Her eyes were distant, focused, but protective. Questions came fast. The defense attorney directed them to me. "Did you feel you were being taught to say things you didn't believe? Did your mom pressure you to make statements? Were you coached?" They tried to paint me as a puppet. I bit my lip. My voice shook when I answered. I wasn't told what to say. I said what I lived." The courtroom murmured. I looked over at Greg. He stared at the floor. He hadn't spoken yet. The defense called multiple experts, psychologists, PR crisis managers, each implying I was a rehearsed performer. But then Mom's attorney rose, calm as ever. She asked me to stand. "Lily," she said softly, "if you could speak directly to Mr. Warren, what would you say?" My throat closed. I blinked away tears. The judge nodded. I took a breath. The rumor of support from around the world, of strangers sending drawings and letters, all threaded through my mind. Then I pointed. Straight at GM, at Greg. "Where do you belong?" The room froze. Silence swallowed the air. Something cracked behind me. I heard a gasp from a reporter, a sniffle from someone in the back. I didn't imagine the half-opened mouths, the brows raised high. Greg looked up. His eyes brimmed. Liquid sorrow or shock, I couldn't tell. His face crumbled, tears spilled, and he curled forward, the suit canting with him, until he buried his face in his hands. He cried. My question was simple, a girl's question, but it stripped him, naked. He couldn't answer. The judge called for order. The bailiffs came. Greg's attorneys murmured, offering tissues, but the look in his eyes, hollow, broken, said more than words ever could. The mood shifted. No longer just a legal case, not just about who wins or how money changes hands. It was a reckoning. Under cross-examination, The defense called the flight attendant, the whistleblower. She sat firm. Her voice wavered at first, but she held steady. She described the racial nicknames, the repeated insults, the avoidance of other flight attendants, the fear she felt. They tried to twist her words, suggesting she sought attention, demanded payment. But her raw grief, her regret that she hadn't spoken sooner, it filled the room with weight. Then came the passengers, a black man, a woman of Asian descent, a Latina mother. They each spoke in turn. They described how Greg looked at them, the tone of his voice. Each testimony added color to the pattern. It wasn't isolated. It was history repeating. The emotional current rose. I sat in my seat, legs shaking. I thought of Marcus's drawing, of every email, of Grandpa's words. I closed my eyes for fear the room would spin. When it was over, Mom and I stepped outside into a hallway. Reporters were trying to get statements. Cameras flashed. But she placed her hand gently on my back. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. I felt drained, but alive. Days later, the verdict arrived in the media. Greg Warren, found guilty of repeated discriminatory behavior and verbal assault. He was ordered to apologize publicly, to attend compulsory training. His company mandated review overhaul. The corporation was fined. A public apology was issued. A foundation for passenger dignity was established in our names. They said I was the youngest person to ever prompt such change in airline policy. But none of that echoed louder than one committee chairman's statement. A 9-year-old girl asked the question no one dared. "Where do you belong?" That evening, Mom and I sat in a small cafe. Not fancy, just coffee and pastries. I stared out at the city lights reflected in glass windows, all across town and across the globe. People were tweeting, sharing stories, posting drawings, photographing slates, reading #StandWithLily. I took a sip of hot chocolate. Mom nudged me. I looked up. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a blank check. $1 million. It came from an anonymous donor, used for Lily's education, not silence. I stared at it and pushed it back. She shook her head. Justice shouldn't be profit. I held her hand. I remembered the seat, the fight, the fall, the question. Then I thought of all the people, the boy named Marcus, the flight attendant, strangers across continents who stood with me. Tears sprang softly. This time, they weren't fear. They were something else. Resolution. The courtroom verdict rippled far beyond the marble walls and televised headlines. Within 48 hours, Greg Warren's former employer, a global logistics and airline technology conglomerate, was placed under formal investigation. Not by one, but 3 international regulatory bodies. The pressure wasn't just legal. It was moral, ethical, global. News anchors used the same phrase over and over again. A 9-year-old girl shattered the silence. I didn't know how to feel about that. I was still the same girl who liked peanut butter sandwiches and drawing castles. Still scared of the dark sometimes. Still flinched at loud arguments. But now, I was also something else. Something the world insisted on turning into a symbol. One morning, our hotel phone rang. Mom answered. Her tone stayed neutral, but her eyes narrowed. She thanked the caller and hung up. "What is it?" I asked. She sat down beside me. A former employee from Greg's company just stepped forward. "Another witness?" She nodded. "No, not just a witness. A whistleblower." That afternoon, we met the man in a quiet legal office, away from cameras. He looked nervous, young but tired, wearing a rumpled button-up and clutching a USB drive like it was gold. "My name's Jacob," he said. "I worked under Greg Warren for 4 years in corporate HR." His voice shook. "I should have come forward years ago, but I was scared. I watched people get pushed out, quietly, systematically, because they weren't white enough, old enough, aggressive enough. There were always excuses, always performance issues or team compatibility, but it was discrimination. We all knew." He placed the drive on the table. 10 years of internal reports, he said. Suppressed complaints, redacted memos, emails, names of people who were never given a chance. Mom took the drive gently. Thank you. He looked down. No, thank you. Your daughter gave me the guts. That night, the news exploded. The documents were verified. Leaks spread online. Hashtags multiplied. Systemic shame, #10 years of silence. And of course, #stand with Lily surged again. Corporate leaders resigned. A dozen lawsuits were filed within a week. 3 major airlines issued public statements vowing to audit their own protocols. But the most shocking change came quietly, from an unexpected source. The International Council for Ethical Aviation issued a new charter, the Passenger Dignity Accord. It listed non-negotiables. Racial and age-based discrimination on flights would be prosecuted with maximum transparency. Airlines had 60 days to retrain their global staff. Cabin cameras, anonymous reporting tools, and dignity monitors would become standard. In every conference room, on every panel, the phrase kept echoing. It started with a stolen seat. Our hotel room became a strange kind of command center. Journalists left letters. Lawyers knocked daily. Advocates sent flowers. One day, we received a framed certificate from a United Nations subcommittee. I didn't even know what that was. It said, "In recognition of courage and moral clarity in the face of systemic injustice." But Mom frowned. "They want us to attend a ceremony," she said quietly, "in New York, to accept an award." I looked up. "Are we going?" She shook her head. "No." "Why not?" She exhaled. "Because we didn't do this for applause. We didn't want fame. We wanted justice." I didn't fully understand it then, but later I would. Fame burns bright and fast. Justice builds slowly, but lasts. One evening, we walked into the lobby to leave for a quiet dinner when we passed a little girl standing by the elevator. She looked about 6, holding her dad's hand. She stared at me, eyes wide, then slowly stepped forward. She didn't say anything, just reached into her tiny backpack and pulled out a small paper flower, carefully folded, pink and creased from travel. She handed it to me and whispered, "You made the plane safe." Then she ran back to her dad. Later that night, I looked at the flower and thought about what Jacob had said, about all the people who had lost jobs, confidence, and hope because of silence. I wasn't smarter than them. I wasn't stronger. I was just the first one small enough that the world couldn't ignore the harm. That's what scared them. Because if a girl with crayons could topple giants, what else could we all do together? On our last night before flying home, I found Mom on the balcony. She was holding a letter, an invitation from an international ethics panel asking her to speak about parental leadership in child-centered justice. She folded it without reading the rest. "You're not going?" I asked. She smiled softly. "I've said enough." I nodded. "Can I say something?" She looked surprised. "Of course." I thought about it carefully, then said, "Maybe we didn't want to be famous, but we showed people that even kids can ask big questions." She wrapped her arm around me and kissed the top of my head. "Yes," she whispered. "That we did." The morning sunlight filtered through thin hotel curtains, but the room felt dark with decision. Emily sat at the small desk, a stack of documents before her, her expression both pensive and resolute. I sat beside her on the bed, legs crossed, tracing lines in the carpet with my finger. I knew something big was coming. I just didn't know how it would land. Finally, she spoke, quietly. "Lily, I've decided to resign." My heart paused. "I'm resigning from the commission," she continued, "effective immediately." I stared at her, confusion and fear mixing like storm clouds. "But why?" I asked, voice small. She looked at me, steady but soft. "Because I promised you something." I blinked slowly. "I promised you peace. I promised you childhood." Her words were slower now, softer, but each one carried weight I hadn't expected. Ending her career at the commission meant admitting defeat to some. It meant walking away from influence, from pay, from identity. For her, the buzz of power had always been a tool. Now it would be a tether. She chose freedom instead. In the subsequent hours, we packed. Not for travel, though that followed soon, but for something deeper, a return to quiet, a return to ordinary. We said goodbye to our team, the agents and attorneys, allies who had rallied since Chapter 1. They tried to protest. They argued she was needed, but she insisted, maybe the next generation will know how to fight without leading. And I knew, in that moment, her war was done. Our flight home was quiet, too quiet, but I didn't mind. I stared out the plane window at clouds, at the horizon, at the world continuing without asking forgiveness or offering indulgence. I wanted that world. Simple, unlabeled. One afternoon, I found a plain envelope in our mailbox. No return address, just my name in scribbled handwriting, Miss Lily Anderson. I pulled out a letter. It was thin, single page, but inside, every line soared. Dear Lily, you may not realize this, but the charter your mother helped trigger was adapted by our parliament in Nairobi this week. They passed new laws protecting passengers, especially children and minorities, from discrimination. I serve with the East African Human Rights Council. You didn't just change your flight, you changed our country. You taught legislators across continents that one voice is enough. Yours. With deep gratitude, Amina Omari, Chair, East African Rights Commission. My breath caught. A deep ache of pride and disbelief swelled. Mom came in, saw the letter, and just let me read it before she said anything. When I looked up, she had tears in her eyes. No strength, just love. I didn't do this for recognition, she whispered. But they sent the letter to me, she nodded, because you made it real. After landing at home, the world seemed to know. Reporters staked outside, teachers took photos. My classmates, well, they looked at me differently, but not cruelly, just curious. Most were kind, some even afraid to talk. But I smiled, I waved, I said nothing, because there was something stronger than words. That evening, Mom and I sat in the living room. Grandfather joined us. We had popcorn, and Grandpa asked about school and cartoons. They restored normalcy like an art. But across the globe, things had shifted. Airlines posted long apologies. Firms fired executives. Ethics boards opened hearings. The campaign "Have Her Stand with Lily" became part of policy discussions. And still, Mom resigned quietly. Twist 11. Lay not in the ceremony or headlines. It lay in the silence after, in the choice to let her child grow without expectation, without legacy. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I remembered what I'd said in that courtroom. I'm not afraid anymore. 1 month later, we found another letter, addressed again to me, this time from an NGO in South Africa, Children's Voice in Democracy. They wrote, "Because of your courage, we were able to shift our public transport laws to prioritize children and passengers of differing abilities. Your fight inspired our youth. It led to national discussion about dignity in travel." It closed with, "You may have been 9 when you started. Today, you are 17 million voices." I pressed it to my heart. Mom kissed my forehead. "You changed the world, Lily." And she meant it. The next morning, I woke early and walked outside. The breeze was crisp, neighbors jogging, birds, ordinary, but I felt extraordinary. Inside, a framed drawing from Marcus sat by my dresser, the girl with a crown, standing on the seat. But now, behind her stood many others, children, adults, shadows lifted, representing dozens of people who found their voice. I took it down, placed it gently on my desk beside homework and pencils and unread storybooks. It felt right. Later, I told Mom, "I want to go back to school tomorrow." She smiled. "You want to be just Lily again?" I nodded. She nodded back. "Then you are." The world still quoted me. The laws still named me. The hashtag still trended occasionally. But in my house, in school, in my own life, I was just me. Just Lily Anderson. 9 years old, girl with crayons, girl who asked a question. And I knew, you don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, silence is the strongest echo. The airport terminal was unusually quiet for such a monumental return. No banners, no music, no red carpets, just gates, announcements, coffee smells, and the soft sound of home calling us back. Mom and I walked side by side, our bags light but our hearts heavy with everything we were leaving behind. The hotel rooms, the courtrooms, the newsrooms, they had all become chapters. But this was the closing line. "Boarding Group 1, now welcome aboard," the speaker echoed. Mom handed our tickets to the agent. I followed behind her in silence. I clutched my backpack to my chest and felt something inside it. Marcus's drawing, now creased from being handled too often. When we stepped onto the plane, the smell of recycled air and warm plastic rushed into my lungs. For the first time, it didn't make me nervous. We moved past rows of faces, some looking up, others glued to screens. No one whispered this time. No one pointed. But I saw one flight attendant look at my name tag and softly mouth, "Welcome back, Lily." Row 9, Seat A, business class. It was the same kind of seat, same soft leather, same gentle window curve. But this time, it wasn't just a seat. It was mine. I sat down slowly, placed my backpack under the seat in front of me, and looked out the window. The sun was rising over the tarmac, painting gold across the edge of the wing. I leaned closer and whispered to the seat, "Now I know where I belong." The flight home was smooth. No turbulence, no tension. Just a mother and daughter sharing a silence filled with everything unspoken. Midway through the flight, I reached into my bag and pulled out a new sketch pad. I began drawing. Not people this time. Not shadows. Just seats. Dozens of them. Big, small, aisle, window. All different shapes. All open. Because that's what I wanted the world to remember. Seats were never about status. They were about space. The kind we all deserve. When the wheels touched down on the home runway, a wave of emotion surged through me. Not fear, not adrenaline. Relief. Like something had been set back in its rightful place. The captain's voice welcomed us to the city. The flight attendant smiled. And as the plane rolled to a stop at the gate, I unbuckled my belt with a calmness I didn't know I had. The world had been watching for months, but I had been waiting for this moment. The airplane door opened. Flashes of light exploded beyond the glass corridor. Cameras, microphones, reporters elbowing for space. I could barely see through the blinding bursts. "Lily! Emily! Do you think justice was served? Lily, what do you want to say to kids around the world?" Mom looked at me. "We can go out the side gate if you want," she whispered. But I shook my head. I stepped forward. Then I ran. Right past the flashing bulbs, past the shouting voices, past the wall of questions, toward one person. Standing just behind the ropes, beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a pair of wire glasses, was Grandpa, holding a paper sign that read, "Thrones belong to queens." I threw myself into his arms, squeezing tightly. His scent, leather and peppermint, felt like everything I'd missed, everything I had fought for. He hugged me back, then leaned down and whispered into my ear, "That seat was never just on a plane, kiddo. That seat was always right here." He tapped his chest. I cried, not because I was sad, but because something deep, ancient, and aching had finally found stillness. We walked away from the crowd together. No interviews, no statements. Just a girl and her mother and her grandfather, heading toward the parking lot like any other family. But the world still turned behind us. And so, in a quiet corner of a courtroom 1,000 miles away, a man sat in silence. Judge 12 came not with fanfare, but with a camera pan. Inside a stark courtroom lined with lawyers and judges sat Greg Warren. He was alone, not flanked by attorneys, not defended by board members. He sat in the gallery, watching as his company, once untouchable, stood trial again. This time for institutional failures, for corruption, for systemic discrimination across a decade. The men who once laughed with him now avoided his gaze. The executives he once silenced now faced questions he could no longer answer. He reached for a glass of water. His hand trembled. And in the row beside him, empty chairs. No one saved him a seat, not even the system he once manipulated, because now he didn't belong anywhere. Meanwhile, across oceans, a child boarded a train in Kenya. Another took a school bus in Thailand. One stepped onto a city tram in Brazil. Each of them held something in common: a right to dignity, a space to sit, and the echo of a girl who had once asked, "Where do you belong?" I went home that night and taped Marcus's drawing above my bed. Not for the fame, not for the story, but for the reminder that even when the world tries to take your space, you can make a throne out of courage.